So in this video, we're going to talk about how to solve systems of linear equations using substitution. So remember we said there are three ways to solve systems. We already talked about graphing, and in today's lesson, we're going to talk about substitution. So substitution is a method that we use when we have a system when one of the equations is in y equals something or x equals something form. So you can see in this first system, I have y isolated by itself in one of my equations. So I can use substitution to solve this system. In the second system, you can see I have an equation where x is isolated, so we can use, once again, substitution to solve this system of equations. So the expression of the solved equation will become the definition of the variable in the other equation. So for example, if I was going to work on solving this first system by substitution, 6x minus 11 would replace y in my second equation. So when I rewrote this equation, this would be negative 2x minus 3 times 6x minus 11 equals negative 7. So I can use this equation now to find the value of x. Similarly, in the second system, if I have x equals negative 3y plus 1, that whole entire negative 3y plus 1 will take the place of x in the second system. So I have 3 times negative 3y plus 1 plus 3y equals 15, which is an equation I can now use to solve for y. So we'll work on solving these two systems a little bit later in this lesson. So remember, when we're finding solutions, the solution to a system is an ordered pair. So we want an x value and a y value to be in our solution. And remember, when these x and y values are plugged into our system, it will make both equations true. So how do we solve by substitution? We're going to start off by solving one of the equations for one of the variables, if it's not already solved. Then we're going to substitute this expression into the other equation. We're going to solve for the remaining variable, and then we're going to plug this value into one of the other equations to solve for the other variable. So let's solve this equation by substitution. So this is the system that I showed you a few slides ago. So once again, we have negative 3y plus 1. And so that is going to take the place of x in my second equation. So we have 3 times negative 3y plus 1 plus 3y equals 15. So you see, all I've done is rewritten this second equation, except I've replaced x with negative 3y plus 1. So now look at this equation. It looks like one of those equations we were solving back in Unit 1, right? So we have to use the distributive property to start to simplify this. So I'm going to distribute the 3 to everything within the parentheses. So I have 3 times negative 3y plus 3 times 1 plus 3y equals 15. So when I simplify this, I get negative 9y plus 3 times 1, which is 3, plus 3y equals 15. Remember, when I'm solving equations like this, I want to combine any like terms that I have. You can see here that my like terms are negative 9y and 3y. So when I combine those two terms, negative 9y plus 3y, I get a total of negative 6y. So I have negative 6y plus 3 equals 15. So now I can solve this equation for y by subtracting 3 from both sides. So when I subtract 3 from both sides, I get negative 6y equals 15 minus 3, which is 12. I can now solve this equation by dividing both sides by negative 6, which gives me y equals negative 2. So remember, I'm not done yet solving my system because a system will have a solution that is an x and a y value. So I've done half of this problem. I found that y equals negative 2. Now I need to figure out the value of x. So the way I do this is I take this value of negative 2 and I'm going to plug it into one of these two equations. So it's going to be a little bit easier if I plug it into the first equation because you can see that equation is already solved for x. So I'm going to go here and instead of y, I'm going to substitute negative 2. So I have x equals negative 3 times negative 2 plus 1. So when I simplify this, I get x equals negative 3 times negative 2, which is positive 6, plus 1. So I have x equals 6 plus 1, which is x equals 7. So 7, negative 2 is the solution to this system of equations. So now let's try solving this system by substitution. So this is one of the examples I showed you earlier. So we're going to take 6x minus 11 and plug that in for y. So we have negative 2 minus 3 times 6x minus 11 equals negative 7. So here I'm going to distribute after a subtraction sign. So if you remember back to Unit 1, I was always rewriting those problems as plus negative. And that is because I'm actually going to distribute that as a negative 3. So I'm going to distribute that to everything in the parentheses. So I have negative 2x plus negative 3 times 6x. Bring down that subtraction sign, and I have negative 3 times 11, and that equals negative 7. Now let's simplify what we have here. We have negative 2x plus negative 3 times 6x, which is negative 18x, minus negative 3 times 11, which is negative 33, and that equals negative 7. So now we're going to combine some of these double signs that we have. So we have negative 2x. This plus negative is going to become a subtraction, so I have minus 18x. And this minus negative is going to become a plus, so I have plus 33. And that equals negative 7. Now to simplify this, I'm going to combine these two like terms. I have two x terms, so I have minus 2x minus 18x. That will combine to give me negative 20x plus 33 equals negative 7. So now I have this equation, negative 20x plus 33 equals negative 7. To solve this equation, I'm going to start off by subtracting 33 from both sides. So when I subtract 33 from both sides, I get negative 20x equals negative 7 minus 33, which is negative 40. Now to solve for x, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 20. So when I do that, on the left side, the negative 20 and negative 20 will cancel. So I have x equals negative 40 divided by negative 20, which is 2. So remember, once again, I've only solved for half of my system so far because I need an x value and I need a y value. So to figure out the value of y, I'm going to plug in. I'm going to plug into this first equation because that is already solved for y. So I get y equals 6x minus 11. Remember, instead of x, I'm going to plug in this value of 2 that I have. So I have y equals 6 times 2 minus 11, which gives me y equals 12 minus 11, which means that y equals 1. So 2, 1 is the solution to the system of equations. So now let's try solving this system by substitution. So I have 10x minus y equals 53, and then I have y equals negative 13x plus 92 over 2. So once again, here is my expression that I can plug into this equation instead of y. So I have 10x minus negative 13x plus 92 divided by 2, and that is all equal to 53. So now you may be asking yourself why I put this expression in parentheses. The reason is because I'm subtracting this entire expression. So since I'm going to end up distributing that subtraction, that's why I put it all in parentheses. Before I get to the distributing part, I kind of want to look at this problem and see if there's a way that I can simplify it. So I kind of want to simplify this because I noticed that this is all being divided by 2. So I can actually clear out that fraction. Remember that I can do anything in an equation as long as I do the same thing to both sides. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to multiply this whole equation by 2 just so that I can get rid of that fraction. So what will happen here is I'll distribute this 2 to every term. So I have 2 times 10x minus 2 times all of this, negative 13x plus 92 divided by 2. And that equals 2 times 53. Okay, because that 2 is going to be distributing everywhere. So 2 times 10x will give me 20x. And then I have minus. Well, here, the 2 in the numerator, so this is like a 2 over 1. The 2 here and the 2 here will cancel. So I'm left with just negative 13x plus 92. And that equals 2 times 53, which is 106. So now I can work on simplifying this equation. I have 20x minus negative 13x plus 92 equals 106. Well, once again, I have a minus that I need to distribute. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that into a 20x plus negative. Remember, that means that there is a negative 1 right there, right? If there is no number, that is a negative 1. And then plus 92 equals 106. So I'm going to go ahead now and distribute that negative 1. So I have 20x plus negative 1 times negative 13x plus negative 1 times 92, and that equals 106. So now when we simplify, we get 20x plus negative 1 times negative 13x is just going to be positive 13x, plus negative 1 times 92 is going to be negative 92. That equals 106. So now the 20x plus 13x is going to give me the total of 33x. I have a plus negative that I'm going to go ahead and turn into a subtraction. So I have minus 92 equals 106. So when I have 33x minus 92 equals 106, I'm going to solve this equation for x by adding 92 to both sides. So when I add 92 to both sides, I get 33x equals 106 plus 92, which is 198. Now to solve for x, I'm going to divide both sides by 33. So when I divide both sides by 33, I get x equals 6. So remember, once again, this x equals 6 is only half of the problem. I need to go back and actually figure out the value of y. So I'm just going to use this first equation to figure out the value of y. So I have 10x minus y equals 53. So when I plug in, I have 10x minus y equals 53. I'm going to substitute 6 for x, so I have 10 times 6 minus y equals 53. 10 times 6 is 60, so 60 minus y equals 53. Now to solve for y, I'm going to do the opposite of 60, and I'm going to subtract 60 from both sides, which gives me negative y equals 53 minus 60, which is negative 7. Remember that negative y basically means it's a negative 1y. So to solve for y, I'm going to divide everything by negative 1. So that will give me y equals negative 7 divided by negative 1, which is 7. So now I have my x value and my y value. So the solution to this system will be 6, 7. So let's try now solving this system by substitution. We have 2x minus y equals negative 15 and 4x plus 3y equals 5. So you can see here that one equation is not already solved for one of the variables, right? So sometimes we have to do a little bit of extra work and go ahead and solve the equation ourselves. So you're going to kind of pick the equation where one of the coefficients is 1. So you see, like here, I kind of have a y that's like almost by itself, but I just have to do a little bit of rearranging to get it by itself. So what I can do is this 2x minus y equals negative 15. I can work on getting this into y equals form. Because remember, if it's in y equals something form, I can use substitution. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. And that gives me negative y equals negative 2x minus 15. Well, y is still not totally by itself. Remember, that is basically a negative 1y. So I'm going to divide everything by negative 1 to get y by itself. So I have y equals negative over negative will be positive, so I have positive 2x, and then minus 15 over negative 1, those two negatives will cancel, giving me plus 15. So now I have an expression I can substitute into this second equation for y. So I have 4x plus 3y equals 5, and when I substitute what I have 4x plus 3 times 2x plus 15 equals 5. So now to simplify this, I can start with a distributive property. So I have 4x plus 3 times 2x plus 3 times 15 equals 5. So that gives me 4x plus 3 times 2x, which is 6x, plus 3 times 15, which is 45, and that equals 5. So now I'm going to combine my like terms to simplify. So I have 4x plus 6x, which is 10x. So I have 10x plus 45 equals 5. So now I'm going to solve this equation for x. So 10x plus 45 equals 5. I'm going to solve by subtracting 45 from both sides. And when I do that, on the left side, I have 10x equals 5 minus 45, which is negative 40. And now I'm going to divide both sides by 10 to solve for x. So I have x equals negative 4. Remember, once again, I've only done half of my problem, so now I still need to figure out the value of y. I'm going to use this first equation to solve for y. So I have 2x minus y equals negative 15. And then I also have my solved value of x equals negative 4. So I'm going to plug this x equals negative 4 back into my equation. So I have 2 times negative 4 minus y equals negative 15. So 2 times negative 4 is going to be negative 8. And then I have minus y equals negative 15. Now to solve for y, I'm going to add 8 to both sides. So when I do that, I am left with negative y equals negative 15 plus 8, which is negative 7. Remember that negative y is basically negative 1y, so I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1, and that will give me y equals negative 7 divided by negative 1, which is positive 7. So now I have my x value and my y value, so I can write my solution as negative 4, 7. So now let's try solving this equation by this system of equations by substitution. I have 8x plus 2y equals 28 and x minus 2y equals 8. So looking at these equations, I think it may be easier to solve this second equation in terms of x. So I'm going to try to get this into x equals something form. So that means I'm going to move everything away from x. So this minus 2y, I'm going to go ahead and add 2y to both sides. And then I'm going to get x equals 2y plus 8. So this is now solved for x. So I'm going to take this and plug it into this first equation. So I get 8 times 2y plus 8 plus 2y equals 28. I'm going to start off with a distributive property. So I have 8 times 2y plus 8 times 8 plus 2y equals 28. 8 times 2y is 16y plus 8 times 8 is 64 plus 2y equals 28. Let's go ahead and combine these like terms. So we have 16y plus 2y, and then we have plus 64 equals 28. 16y plus 2y is going to be 18y. So we have 18y plus 64 equals 28. So now let's work on solving this equation for y. So to solve this equation for y, I'm going to start off by subtracting 64 from both sides. So when I do that on the left, I am left with 18y equals, and then we do 28 minus 64, which gives us negative 36. So now to solve for y, I'm going to divide both sides by 18. So when I divide both sides by 18, I'm left with y equals negative 36 over 18, which is negative 2. So now I've solved half of my problem. I need to now figure out the value of x. So I'm going to use this equation, this x minus 2y equals 8. So I have x minus 2y equals 8, and then I'm going to use this equation with y equals negative 2. So I have y equals negative 2, and I'm going to plug in here for y. So I have x minus 2 times negative 2 equals 8. So I have x minus 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. That equals 8. Minus negative will become plus, so I have x plus 4 equals 8. To solve this equation for x, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 4 from both sides. So I have x equals 8 minus 4, which is 4. So my solution to my system is going to be 4, negative 2. So just some problem solving tips. To figure out which equation and which variable to solve for, try to look for the variable that has a coefficient of 1. So for example, in this system, it made sense to solve for x because x already had a coefficient of 1. So once you've solved for this variable, you're going to substitute the expression that you have into the other equation. Remember, here's the summary of solving by substitution. You're going to solve an equation for one of the variables if it's not already solved, substitute this expression into the other equation, and then solve for the remaining variable. You're going to plug this value into one of the equations to solve for the other variable. Remember that we need to have an x value and a y value in order to solve a system of equations.